Hey everyone, Firegross here, and today I want to talk about a map experiment that I ran on stream a little over a week ago. So based on data I've collected over the last few leagues and observations I've made, I have begun hypothesizing that map drops almost certainly are affected by a bad luck protection system. Namely, there are a lot of situations where I run a really juiced map and I don't get any map drops from it, but the very next map I run has no juice whatsoever and I get 3 to 4 maps dropped from it. So that can just be dismissed as random chance, but that's also why I wanted to run this experiment. So our hypothesis is that map drops are not truly random, and rather they're based on a bad luck protection system where there are one or multiple invisible bars of progression, and that these bars of progression basically fill up as you complete a map or as you do league mechanics, as you kill monsters, etc. And the way that I decided this would be easy to prove was through the use of cartography scarabs in a particular way. So the way we would do this is basically running 100 maps as a control, and then running another 200 maps, alternating between one map where we run a gilded cartography scarab for 50% more map drops, and then a second map where we run no scarab. These maps would be run with just an Alk and Go strategy. All league mechanics would be skipped. All connected maps dropped from the final boss would be discounted. This is because they are tied to Atlas drops and Awakening level rather than natural map drops. And then on top of that, the only maps we're going to run are tier 14, as running tier 15 or 16 could influence the amount of map drops that we end up dropping. So you're probably wondering exactly why the Scarab strategy that I just laid out would be a good way to prove this, and that's basically because if we run it in this particular way, hypothetically, the way it should work is that these bars of progression should fill up and then trigger map drops during the cartography scarab maps, and that would result in the following map where we don't run a scarab being at the reset point of the invisible bar of progression, and that means that in the non-scarab map, even less maps are going to drop than normal, whereas on the other hand, they are then building up, and the following map we run them when the bad luck protection is built up and with the scarab, and we get extra map drops in that map. So before I go through these results, I do want to actually point out that I ran this experiment separately. I did half of the experiment on stream, and then I did the other half of the experiment off stream, and the results ended up pretty much being the same percentage-wise with both sets of data. So our group A map drops were kind of expected. We ended up dropping 83 with a split of 42-41, if I recall correctly. And that basically means that when you're running maps with an Alk and Go strategy and you're not doing any other juice, you're not putting chisels, you're not putting Val Orbs, you're not using, fragments, scarabs, sextants, and you're skipping all league mechanics, you can expect to under-sustain your map pool by around 20%. And that's further influenced by the fact that we're running tier 14 maps. Obviously, if we were running tier 16 maps, the amount of maps that we dropped would have ended up being higher. On the other hand, our Group B map drops were way higher than what they should have been. So the Group B maps were affected by gilded cartography scarabs, and that meant that we should be seeing 50% more map drops total, or in other words, we should be seeing something around 125 map drops. Instead, we got 144 map drops. We got 173% more map drops in that group of 100 maps compared to the Group A. So Group C dropped 19 less maps than what it should have compared to Group A. We got 64 maps back from 100, and this is incredibly on the low end. I have a very hard time believing that this is simply the result of bad luck, but rather I am very inclined to believe that this confirms the theory of bad luck protection as far as map drops are concerned. 64 is just really low. We're basically under-sustaining by 1/3 at that point, and that shouldn't really happen. So as you can see, we dropped 77% of the Group A map drops. Now, the craziest thing about all this data is that when you add both Group B and C together, you get 250% of the Group A map drops. Or rather, you get, on average, 125% map drops. That is what you would expect if you were running Gilded Cartography Scarabs on only half of the maps, right? Gilded Cartography Scarabs add 50% more maps, but if you're only going to run half of them, with Gilded Cartography Scarabs, you're only getting 25% more maps. And that's what we got overall. We got, on average, 25% more maps. Now, this is kind of crazy when you think about it, because even though we went way higher than what we should have on Group B and way lower than what we were expecting on Group C, it still averaged out to around the same. So this almost confirms that basically what's happening is what I thought would happen, that we're triggering the map drop in the Group B map, and then we are spending the Group C map building the bad luck protection back up, only to then use the Scarab to force the trigger again in the following Group B map. I think the most interesting observation from all this is that this also shows us that we can't really manipulate the way in which we use cartography scarabs to drop more maps than what we should overall. Trying to manipulate the map drops via putting cartography scarabs in select maps only will result in more than the amount of maps we're supposed to get from that cartography scarab, but it will result in getting less maps in the following map. And as a result, it's going to end up balancing out in the long term. So, you know, if a Gilded Cartography Scarab, if you're using Gilded Cartography Scarabs and they say that they're giving 50% more maps, you can expect to get 50% more maps all up. It doesn't matter how you use them, it doesn't matter which maps you're putting them in, you're getting 50% more maps than what you would have if you weren't running the Gilded Cartography Scarabs. The other conclusion to take from this is that if bad luck protection does work, then it means that when we're progressing our Atlas, we don't really need to stress about not getting map drops in a map that we just juiced up. If you chuck a bunch of juice into a map and you don't get a map drop, don't stress, because it just means that you're going to get a whole bunch of maps in the following map, or, you know, the following 2 maps, for example. The main thing is that as long as we are killing as many monsters as possible, as long as we are, you know, interacting with all the league mechanics that generate extra monsters and all that sort of thing, we are increasing our map drops on average. And I think this also agrees with a lot of the data I've collected internally. A lot of it is stuff that I'm not really ready to share with the community as a whole, but it does sort of line up with a lot of the things I was expecting going into this experiment. So, was the sample size too small here? Was this just the result of crazy RNG? I'll let you guys be the judge. I think it would be very interesting if some of you wanted to repeat this experiment for yourselves and see if you get data similar to mine or not. I don't really have any intention of repeating this experiment, given that I basically set out to prove a certain thing and the data came back in a way that confirms what I thought. And I think that the sample size is large enough for me to feel that, given all the things we already know about map drops, and given the way GGG are likely to design the game, bad luck protection almost certainly exists. I'm going to behave going forward as though it does exist, even though I have not physically confirmed it 100%. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, give me a like, comment, and subscribe, and I will hopefully see you in the next one.